The wagon halted just before dusk. The horses stood still, their ears twitching at something unseen in the woods. The breeze was soft, barely enough to rustle the tall Kansas grass, but the man driving the lead wagon, Elias Carter, felt a sudden chill. It wasn't the cold, it was something else. A hush too complete. A silence too deep. Elias scanned the tree line, squinting into the brush. Nothing moved. No birds, no squirrels. Even the insects had gone still. Behind him, the others began to dismount. His wife Rebecca climbed down from the back of the wagon, cradling their infant son. His brother Samuel unloaded an axe. They had arrived. This was the spot. They had followed the Blue River southeast from Marysville, bound for the frontier. The soil here was dark and rich. The creek ran fast and clean. The forest was thick enough for timber, the clearing wide enough for crops. It was far from town, yes, but they wanted that. The quiet, the distance, the chance to begin again. It was 1858, and Kansas was bleeding. Not from war, at least not officially, but from conflict, from tension, from the long shadow of slavery and land. Settlers were pouring in from the east. Abolitionists, pro-slavery men, opportunists, families looking to stake a claim. The land was unceded. The native tribes who'd lived there, Kansa, Pawnee, and others, had been pushed, sold, or slaughtered. But some remained, watching. That night, they set up camp by the riverbank. Samuel chopped wood while Elias sketched the outline of their future cabin. Rebecca boiled coffee and cornbread. Their daughter May, just 7, gathered wildflowers, unaware that she was the only color in a landscape going gray. They lit a fire. They sang a hymn. And in the woods, eyes watched them. The first sign came at dawn. A single arrow, embedded in the tree beside the wagon. It had come in low, clean, and silent, driven deep into the bark. No one had heard it. No one had seen a thing. Elias pulled it free and held it in his palm. It was bone-tipped. Feathers dyed dark red. He turned slowly, scanning the tree line again. Still no movement. Still no sound. He said nothing. Instead, he handed the arrow to Samuel and quietly told Rebecca to pack what she could. But they were too late. A cry rang out, May's voice. Elias turned and saw her running toward them from the creek. Behind her, smoke curled above the brush. The supply wagon, which they had unhitched to make room for the cabin frame, was burning. Then came the second arrow. It struck Samuel in the leg. He cried out and fell. Elias drew his rifle, but from the woods, 5, 6, a dozen figures broke from the trees. Men on foot, some mounted, faces painted in white and black streaks, arrows loosed, muzzle flashes popped. Rebecca screamed. The Carter family ran, not to fight, but to flee. Elias grabbed May with one hand, Rebecca with the other, the infant still in her arms. They dashed for the riverbank, where trees thickened and the slope offered cover. Behind them, the raiders surged into the clearing, setting fire to the wagons, overturning crates, ransacking what they could. One of the horses shrieked, a terrible human sound, and then there was only chaos. Elias fired once over his shoulder, then again. But the sound was swallowed by the wind. They made it to the trees. They ran. By nightfall, they were miles upstream. May sobbed quietly against her mother's chest. Elias kept moving, kept listening. Samuel was gone, likely dead. The wagon was gone. The seed, the tools, the crates of flour. Gone. All they had was what they could carry, and the baby wouldn't stop coughing. The next 2 days passed in a daze. They walked by moonlight, slept in bramble thickets. The child's cough worsened. Rebecca's face grew hollow. May stopped speaking. Elias rationed the last of their dried beans, but there was no fire, no way to cook. Every sound in the forest was suspect. On the third day, they came upon a second clearing. Smoke rose faintly in the distance. Elias crept ahead, told Rebecca to stay hidden. He moved low, rifle drawn, stepping carefully through the brush until the source came into view. A cabin, not theirs, larger, weather-worn, someone else's claim. He raised his hand and was answered by the click of a hammer behind his head. "Name," came a voice. "Elias Carter," he said slowly. "My family, my wife and kids, we've been attacked." The man behind the rifle lowered it. His name was Amos Wright. He was a former soldier, a Missourian, retired and hardened. He brought Elias inside, fed him bread, and when Elias returned with his family, Amos said nothing, just stoked the fire and began boiling water. That night, they learned the truth. Amos had seen the raiders, too. Said they'd come through the week before, torching a rival claim near the river. No one knew for certain who they were. Some thought they were from a southern Cheyenne band. Others said it was a splinter Pawnee group displaced by land theft. But whoever they were angry, desperate, pushed too far, and they were hunting. Amos offered them shelter, but only until the baby's fever passed. "You can't stay," he said bluntly. "They'll come back. This land ain't safe, not anymore." That night, Rebecca sat by the fire and held her son. He was pale now, breathing in gasps. Elias sat beside her, staring into the flame. He felt it then, not just the fear, but the failure. He had brought them here. He had promised them a home, but now he had no map, no plan, only stories of massacre and bones. Outside, Amos paced the porch with his rifle, watching, listening. In the early hours, just before dawn, the baby took one last breath and didn't take another. Rebecca wailed, and the sound pierced the woods like a blade. The attack came at dusk the next day. It began with smoke, burning pitch in a broken bottle tossed onto the roof. Then came the arrows, then the screams. Amos fired first, picking off a figure near the tree line. Elias took his post at the front window. Rebecca crouched behind the table with May, clutching the girl to her chest. They had barred the doors, but the walls were thin, the roof old, and their attackers were relentless. The first breach came through the side window. A body slammed through the shutters, tumbling into the room with a hatchet. Elias swung the butt of his rifle and cracked the man's skull, then fired again into the dark. More arrows. Amos cursed, then screamed. Elias turned just in time to see him fall, blood pouring from his chest. The porch collapsed, fire licking up the side beams. Elias ran to the door and bolted it. They were trapped. He turned to Rebecca. "We run. Now." She nodded. He threw open the back door and kicked it free. Smoke choked the air. Arrows hissed past. He grabbed May, pulled Rebecca with him, and they ran through the woods once more, this time with no destination, no hope, only movement. They reached the river after midnight. The moon hung low, casting a silver sheen across the water. The fire still glowed behind them, distant, fading. But the raiders had not followed. They crossed the water barefoot. Cold. Silent. Then, finally, collapsed in the grass on the far bank. Rebecca wept. May whimpered. Elias sat upright, staring across the dark horizon. He didn't sleep. Weeks later, they reached a road, then a trail, then a town. A man took them in, a preacher. He didn't ask questions, didn't need to. The story was in their eyes. They never found Samuel's body, never returned to the clearing. No cabin was ever completed there. No markers stand along the Blue River. No monument, no plaque. Only the land and the silence. Some say it was just the price of the frontier. Others say it was a clash of civilizations. But the Carters knew what it really was. A promise made and broken. A family caught in the space between dreams and empire. and 3 survivors who never forgot what happened by the water, when the wind stopped blowing and the woods went quiet. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier.